Judge's Corner is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com, the best online retailer for Magic the Gathering singles and sealed product, and GatheringMagic.com, your place to explore the game. Now it's time for Judge's Corner.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching another episode of Judge's Corner. Today we're going to be talking about the interaction of continuous effects, or in other words, the layers of Magic the Gathering. First off, the layers are the order in which we apply many different continuous effects to anything within the game of Magic. Continuous effects are things like target creature gets +3/+3, or you have hexproof. So there are 7 layers in Magic the Gathering, but before we begin and take a look at those, let's go ahead and look at a Magic card, any old card. How about Bear Cub? We can tell a lot by looking at this card, like it's a vanilla creature card with the subtype Bear, and it's green with a power and toughness of 2. But what if we were to modify it a little? What if we cast Turn to Frog on it, applied a liquid metal coating, let it become immense, twist its image, and then namelessly invert it? We could then clone it, diagnose it with agoraphobia, and then watch as the cub busts out some sweet aerial maneuvers. That's a lot of effects, and even though you don't see that many applied onto a card in every game of Magic, it does happen. So what actually happened to the Bear Cub and the clone, and in what order do these effects get applied? This is what the interaction of continuous effects deals with. It handles multiple continuous effects and applies them to anything and everything in a very precise and specific order. We also break entire spells down, applying a little from one effect here or there, all in the order they appear within the 7 layers of Magic. So what are the 7 layers? Well, let's go ahead and show you them in the order in which they're applied. First, there is the copy layer, which, as you might have guessed, deals with all things related to copying, like Clone, Reiterate, Isochron Scepter, and Vesuva. Next is the control layer, which deals with any control-changing effects, like Active Aggression, Gather Specimens, Commandeer, and Mindslaver. Text altering is the third layer, and it involves the changes of a part of a card's text from one thing to another, like with Trait Doctoring, Swirl the Mist, and Mindbend. Keep in mind that changing the text on a card does not mean the same thing as adding or removing things from a card. Nothing is added, only changed. When a card type or color is changed, then the default is that it is dealt with in those specific layers, and not this one. That may leave you wondering why Trait Doctoring or Mindbend is on this list. This is because, while they might affect the card type layer, if a card is changed from, say, an island to a mountain, they can also change other type-related aspects of a card, such as changing Island Walk to Mountain Walk without actually affecting the card type, or protection from red to protection from blue without actually affecting the color. Speaking of types, it's the 4th layer. The type-changing layer deals with main types, like Artifact or Creature. Supertypes, like World or Legend. And subtypes, like Goblin or Elf. You can find type-changing effects on cards like Xenograph, Enchanted Evening, Leyline of Singularity, and this changeling that I can't quite pronounce. Amoeboid Changeling? Amoeboid Changeling? The 5th layer is the color altering layer, and it deals with anything that messes with a card's color, such as Painter's Servant, Moonlace, Distorting Lens, and Blindseer. The 6th layer deals with adding or removing text on cards, such as with Gravity Well, Lace with Moonglove, or all 5 archetypes from Born of the Gods. The 7th and final layer is actually 5 sublayers, all dealing with power and toughness modifying abilities. It's probably the most frequently encountered layer and will need its own episode to go over. For now, we are just introducing you to the layers. First, there's the characteristic defining ability sublayer, which deals with any effects that derive the power and toughness of a creature from characteristics in the game, such as with Tarmogoyf in card types, or Nightmare in the number of swamps you control. The 2nd sublayer is the power and toughness setting layer, which set the power and or toughness to a specific number, like with Omnibian, Diminish, or Godhead of Awe. The 3rd sublayer deals with any power or toughness additions or subtractions. This one is pretty straightforward, with cards like Giant Growth, Dismember, Augur Spree, Moldavine Cloak, or Pin to Earth. The 4th sublayer is the same as the 3rd, but only dealing exclusively with power and toughness additions or subtractions through counters, like those seen with Wall of Roots, Hunger of the Howlpack, or Grim Affliction. And the 5th and final sublayer involves any effects that flip the power and toughness of any creature, like that with Twisted Image. The reason the layers exist in that order is because they're in the most intuitive order for almost every interaction you'll encounter. For example, it just makes sense that a creature you'll steal with Act of Treason would get +1/+1 from your Gaia's Anthem, but this is only because we apply the control changing effect in Layer 2, and then later apply the boost in Layer 7C. This is also why, when the creature returns control to its owner, it won't take the +1/+1 with it. But sometimes it doesn't seem intuitive. For example, if we have a Rock's Faithmender and Twisted Image it becomes a 5/1 in Layer 7E. Then, in combat, if our opponent plays Hydra Surge on our Rhino, you'd think it would be a -4/1, but you'd be wrong. This is because, as mentioned earlier, we apply continuous effects in the order in which they're evaluated within the layers, not the order in which they're played. So, a -5, -0 is applied in Layer 7C to a power and toughness of 1/5, making it a -4/5. Then, a few layers down, we apply the power and toughness reversal, and we end up with the fatal 5 -4, leaving it to wither away due to having a toughness of less than 1. This example highlights the importance of following the correct order when dealing with the layers of magic, but there are paramount exceptions to this rule. First, all characteristic-defining abilities take precedence and are applied first within their respective layers, which is for things like Alloy Golem being a specific color or Changelings being all creature types. Next, we normally apply effects happening in the same layer in timestamp order. That is to say that the most recently played effect in a specific layer will always be applied over any older effects in that layer. For example, if both a levitation and a gravity sphere are under your control at the same time, whether or not your creatures can fly will depend solely on which of the two came into play last. However, sometimes the timestamps can be overwritten. This occurs when there is a dependency on the outcome of the effect. The age-old example is Blood Moon and Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Both of their continuous effects affect Layer 4, so it would stand to reason that whether or not something is just a mountain or a blood crypt depends on which of the two came into play last. But that's not true, for you see, the outcome of what Urborg does depends entirely on what Blood Moon does to Urborg. But Blood Moon will still yield the same effect regardless of what Urborg does to it. This is a dependency, where one effect working depends on what another effect does to it, and it has no effect on the thing affecting it. So, in the end, the non-dependent effect will overwrite the dependent effect. Thus, Blood Moon will make Urborg just a mountain, and Urborg won't make any lands into swamps. Finally, a continuous effect can change whether or not another continuous effect does or doesn't apply. For example, if you control a Bad Moon and a 2/2 black zombie, turning it white will make it so that the Bad Moon no longer buffs the zombie, but it can also mean that Honor of the Pure suddenly does start applying. If a continuous effect affects the game rules and not one of the layers described in the video, then it applies after the 7 layers have been applied, following timestamp orders or dependency order. This applies to things like you have no maximum hand size, or creatures must attack this turn if able. So that's it for our introduction to layers. Of course, we're not done yet. I want to come back and talk about some of the more complex interactions with the layers, some of the less intuitive outcomes, and talk a little bit more at length about timestamps and dependencies. But for now, this should give you a basic grasp to move on to that video. If you have any questions about this episode or any other questions in general, you can always send us an email at judgescorner@gatheringmagic.com or leave a comment below, and myself or someone else will be happy to get back to you. And until next time, make sure to shuffle thoroughly, play at a reasonable pace, and have fun.